Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new NVIDIA daily update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over NVIDIA, let's go over the market, let's talk about what is happening to NVIDIA stock, what we can expect moving forward, and all of that good stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, as per usual, if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you do enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, updates, etc., 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 well, I do share my thoughts, updates, etc., with my members every single day the market is open. In my YouTube membership section down below, the link is down below in the description of the video. For just $3 a month, you get access to the first tier, which is mainly focused on Tesla stock, of course, sometimes other stocks as of right now. I might be changing things around, I'm not sure yet, but mainly Tesla stock, that is the main thing, of course. Or for $5 a month, you get access to the second tier, which of course includes everything in the first tier, Tesla stocks, sometimes other stocks as well for now, or as of right now, I should say. But also NVIDIA daily updates if you're interested. That link is below if you're interested. But yeah, jumping into it, NVIDIA closing the day pretty much flat, down ever so slightly, 0.12%, closing at just above 139 per share. And hey, good news, guys, bulls. Hey, good news. I entered a bullish position. Now it is a pretty small bullish position, and it's pretty safe in my opinion too. Essentially, what I did was actually near the low of the day. Like I said, if NVIDIA drops a decent amount today, which it did in the morning, I will enter cash secured puts. That's what I did. I entered cash secured puts for this Friday. I believe I chose 133 or 134 strike. I can't remember which one I chose. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter. Same thing. Mainly because, I do think it actually might come down there by Friday, but I'm okay buying there mainly because I'm just going to be selling options against it pretty aggressively. So what does this overall mean, though? Let's start with the daily chart. Obviously, it looks a little bit confusing here. There's just a lot going on. I know something about the way NVIDIA chart looks here. Yeah, it does look pretty messy, I will admit, but it is what it is. You kind of get used to it. So I'll just kind of go over briefly what I see in the daily chart. Ultimately, it's similar from what I saw yesterday, right? Well, where we essentially got that, overbought RSI. Again, my RSI is on a more aggressive setting, so that's why my RSI probably doesn't look like yours. It is on a more aggressive setting, but it's overbought. Right, we are overbought in my bands ever so slightly. I'm slightly under it now, but pretty much there. But the more important thing, arguably, is the fact that NVIDIA did, of course, get that gap fill. We are, of course, right at that downward channel resistance right over here. And of course, this is technically because we're making lower lows, lower highs. And this could be that lower high here. And this, of course, has been naturally that lower low. You take the Fibonacci and you can see we rejected almost at perfection at that kind of smart money zone, if you will, that Peter DiCarlo actually calls it. And he's not wrong, right? So that's kind of an area that we're rejecting at almost to perfection, right? So you want to watch out for that, right? That's the fact that we did reject there is a bit of a red flag, right? You want to be careful, especially when, again, like I said, my indicators that I use, that I trade on, which is mainly mean reversion, it is showing that the stock is a little bit on the overbought side, right? Now, I wouldn't say it's insanely overbought or anything like that, but it's, it's a little bit in the overbought side, right, of things. And that's not where I like to buy. And, that's why I only did a pretty safe, in my opinion, cash secured put. So that's kind of what the daily looks like. And again, my overall thesis remains where I personally think, and this is also why I did the cash secured put, that NVIDIA probably isn't going to do a whole lot outside of this range up until earnings, which of course are next week, Wednesday, which is going to be a pretty big event, I'm sure. So ultimately, TLDR, I think NVIDIA isn't going to go much higher than about 142 or 3, something like that. I don't think it'll go much higher than that. But I don't think it'll go much lower than about 133 as well. Worst case scenario, if, I don't know, somehow it goes lower, 129, 128. I don't think that's a worst case scenario up until earnings. But my main levels is about 133 to about 142. That $9-10-ish range, I do expect NVIDIA to pretty much flatline around that area, kind of dry up all that premium that I'm sure has been pretty elevated, especially on the call side on this massive rally. And that's my current expectations, to be completely honest with you. Now, what else kind of further solidifies this potential expectations? Well, is this going to be this massive 1 hour wedge that we are potentially no longer in, actually. So in the morning, we had that little pop-up and we actually fell right back into the wedge. You can almost argue this was a bit of a false breakout of this wedge, right? But ultimately, since the lows that we put in all the way back down here at near 114, we've been essentially creating this wedge, right? We've been kind of zigzagging, and you can see getting tighter and tighter and tighter as we reached more or less the apex of this wedge. And we ended up closing the day with an arguable, and I say the word arguable because it's not definitive, right? I wouldn't say it's convincing of a breakdown, but it does have properties of a potential breakdown right here on NVIDIA. So let's see how we open up tomorrow and whatnot. But this is something to definitely want to, you want to watch out for, right? this does look like a potential breakdown from this massive wedge, which again, usually rising wedges break to the downside, usually falling wedges break to the upside. Just as an example, here's Amazon, the nice looking falling wedge. And look at that. It's, you know, in my opinion, it's probably going to break to the upside. It's looking pretty good. This is pretty much the exact opposite of what AMD or NVIDIA is in, right? This is a falling wedge. This is, of course, a, well, rising wedge. Bullish within it, bearish outside of it, more often than not. Obviously, there's instances and rare cases where it does break to the upside. It's just not as common. They usually do break to the downside, and the reverse, of course, with rising or falling wedges. Anyways, so if this does happen, and if we do get that confirmation, which it looks pretty likely in my opinion, we'll see how tomorrow, of course, goes, but it looks pretty likely. I mean, best case scenario, maybe, you know, it gaps down a bit, like maybe like this 0.2%, let's say, post market, and then it maybe gets a nice little pop up one more time, and then it kind of almost retests this breakdown and then makes its way lower. That's usually what these kind of things play out and how they play out. So if I was someone that shorted stocks or bought puts, which I'm not, but if I was, I'd probably enter like half position here, and I'd probably buy the other half like up here if we get that little pop up in the morning tomorrow morning to retest the breakdown, because I do think that this will also ultimately lead to that little kind of bleed, if you will, to the downside, closer to, again, the mid to potentially even slightly low end of the 130s, which I do expect some decent support to kick in. I don't think NVIDIA is just going to crash into earnings. I think, you know, if it is going to quote unquote, you know, fall more aggressively or quote unquote crash, it will most likely be post earnings, right? If that happens to be the path that it takes, which, you know, it could be. But ultimately, I still expect that, you know, this bleed most likely begins potentially as early as tomorrow, maybe into Friday. And then we make our way down slowly, you know, kind of zigzag down closer to this general vicinity here, find some support, probably get a nice little bounce from here into earnings, and ultimately just really do a whole lot of nothing in this range, like I mentioned. Yeah, as we await earnings. I mean, it's really that simple. That's what I think will happen. That's my current perspective, and that's my current thesis, if you will. So let's see how it ultimately plays out. Let's see if I'm right or wrong. Who knows? But I just want to make it very clear. The larger picture is a bit, you know, in my opinion, there is some concerning signs, right? It is what it is, right? The worst case scenario, like literally the true bear case scenario, is we continue in this descending channel, right? And, you know, what do you do at the top end of the descending channel, assuming it's still a descending channel and it's still intact, which as of right now it is. In theory, you can make a move all the way back down to the opposite end of that descending channel, right? I mean, if you told someone that it was going to move to the bottom of the channel here, closer to like 115, back when NVIDIA was up here at 150 almost, no one would believe you. Everyone will call you a psychopath. And it did that. Now, obviously, this was on some pretty significant news, and or at least in theory significant news, but the point is that it happened. It doesn't matter how it happened or why it happened, it happened. So, you know, that's technically, you can't say that it won't happen again just because you don't want it to, right? It could, you never know, right? It absolutely could happen. That's again, the true bear case scenario, though. That's like the real bear case scenario. On the flip side, if you're a bull, I mean, you should be hoping this happens, in my opinion. I mean, if this happens, I think NVIDIA will most likely get a significant bottom around this level. Like if we do get a drop down to 105, let's just say roughly, you know, I don't know, in March or something like that, I think that'll be a significant bottom for the stock. I think the stock this will be like one of the best opportunities in the market, and I think the stock will significantly rally from this general area. So again, it is short-term pretty bearish, but if you're a bull, why would you not want it to come down here and get shares on the cheapy end, right? This would be like absolutely like phenomenal entry on the stock. So let's see. But again, that's the bearish perspective. I'm not saying that's going to happen for sure. All right, there's a chance that all we do is come down here, earnings is great, and then we just rock it. That absolutely is a possibility. Earnings are always a gamble, and nobody knows how earnings will, you know, be, how good, how bad, or even how the market can react to them, right? So always a massive question mark when it comes to earnings. So take it with a grain of salt naturally. But that's my current perspective as we await earnings. So let's just kind of, you know, see what happens with that. And yeah. In terms of options flow, take a look at options flow. I did see some decent call buying pressure actually come in here. You can see here, nice. Looking 2.4 million call came in around 3 p.m. 138 strike above the ask for next week. Pretty bullish, I'm not gonna lie. Clearly someone doesn't agree with me fully, so we'll see. Clearly someone thinks NVIDIA is making its way higher from here. Yeah, maybe they're right. I mean, I'm not sure. I'll be completely honest. I mean, if NVIDIA breaks out of this, you know, descending channel, I'll gladly re-enter shares up here if that's the case, right? I mean, again, I play what the chart tells me, and if it does that, it does that. I just don't think it will just yet. I think it'll take earnings to do that. But clearly, someone expects earnings to be really well or really good, or they're potentially expecting that maybe the premium, essentially the implied volatility will continue increasing up into the day of earnings, then maybe they're just simply playing that game. Who knows? I mean, there's so many potential stories behind options. That's why it's hard for me to follow it blindly, because I mean, who knows what they're thinking and what the intent is, right? But you have another 2.7 and 2.9 million calls that came in on NVIDIA here for early next month as well. So let's see. I mean, let's see how this plays out. Let's see what happens here. But yeah, that's kind of my current perspective on NVIDIA stock. Let me know what you think down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Peace.